Welcome to Strip Cover Lit, where we squeeze the bigger picture out of literature. I'm Adrian Ford, and we are here for another poetry discussion. A poetry discussion which will appear in two separate playlists here on the channel. Number one being the poetry discussion playlist, now over 300 videos strong, quickly approaching 350 videos strong. But number two being the Emily Dickinson playlist, which is approaching 100 videos strong. I am very proud of the Emily Dickinson playlist because Emily Dickinson, maybe you came to this video with this knowledge already in your head. Emily Dickinson, the greatest mind that ever lived. Not the best American poet, not the greatest poet, the greatest mind that ever lived. In this, look, I have been reading Emily Dickinson for 22 years now. 22 years, since I was 16 years old. And there are always new things that I am finding in her poems. There are always new poems that I am finding. I have not made the journey to sit down and go all the way through Emily Dickinson. I am considering doing that on the channel, a read-along, maybe 5 poems at a time. But the problem with doing that would be I would have to condense so much discussion of the poems, because most, if you didn't know this, most editing platforms, most ways that you can shoot videos, they have to limit it to 30 minutes of tape or recording ability. Otherwise, they have to classify it differently. I don't know exactly all the rules, but there's a higher tax bracket for what they're selling, whatever it is. Anyway, doesn't matter. We have here a poem I'm sure I've read before, but I have never read it in depth like this, and it's just a gorgeous poem. I Cannot Live With You by Emily Dickinson. I cannot live with you. It would be life, and life is over there, behind the shelf. The sexton keeps the key to putting up our life, his porcelain like a cup, discarded of the housewife, quaint or broke. A newer Severus pleases, old ones crack. I could not die with you, for one must wait to shut the other's gaze down. You could not, and I could not stand by and see you freeze without my right of frost, death's privilege. Nor could I rise with you, because your face would put out Jesus, that new grace. Glow plain and foreign on my homesick eye, except that you than he shone closer by. They judge us how, for you served heaven, you know, or sought to. I could not, because you saturated sight, and I had no more eyes for sordid excellence as paradise. And were you lost, I would be, though my name rang loudest on the heavenly fame. And were you saved, and I condemned to be where you were not, that self were hell to me. So we must meet apart, you there, I here, with just the door ajar, that oceans are, and prayer, and that white sustenance, despair. I want to read you something from, I'm going to blank on his name, Harold Bloom. Harold Bloom was one of the most famous pop critics. He would have scoffed at the term pop in front of that, considering himself just a critic. But most critics don't have commercial success, and Harold Bloom did. In his The Best Poems of the English Language from Chaucer through Robert Frost, has a section for Emily Dickinson where he's comparing her loosely to the likes of Walt Whitman and William Shakespeare. And we get this. This is a quote that I also have in Dickinson's darkest poem. a video in both the Emily Dickinson playlist as well as the Darkest playlist, a playlist which I'm very proud of as well. I hope that you check that out sometime. Quote, like Whitman's, Dickinson's poetry looks simple and is very difficult, though the kind of difficulty is very different from that of Leaves of Grass. Whitman is nuanced and evasive, and most figurative where he proclaims he is literal. Dickinson is so cognitively original that she challenges William Blake in that regard. William Shakespeare's powers of thought, quite aside from all his other gifts, are unmatchable in literature and in language. Dickinson, at her strongest, has something in her lyric that recalls the swiftness and compression of Shakespeare's mind. End quote. Now, I think it would be difficult to argue with Harold Bloom on the point that Shakespeare is basically incomparable. Shakespeare is the monument of monuments in English literature. That much is true. Okay, fine. Emily Dickinson, I have long said, has a Hemi engine in her head. And when she revs it up, baby, nobody wants to race. This idea, I cannot live with you, because living with you would be life. And I am not fit for life. Life is over there, behind the shelf. Starting there, starting this poem from that standpoint, starting this poem from that talking point, living with you would be life. I would be alive. I would be whole. I would be worth something. I would be with someone. That would be life. And I am not fit for life. Starting this poem there really does leave us two opportunities for grand interpretation here. Now, grand interpretation, what I mean by that is the two real ways that this poem can be taken. There is a straightforward point, and there is an ironic point. There is a subversive point that could be made. The on-the-nose, straightforward, literal interpretation of this poem, starting with that statement there, I cannot live with you, it would be life, and life is over there. When you read the rest of this poem literally, as if this is the individual speaking and saying, look, it's just too much. I love you too much. I want you too much. I desire and feel too strongly for you. It would be too extreme. And if we died and I went to heaven and you went to hell, I'd have to tell whoever's at the gate, look, baby, I got someplace to be. I can't come in. But if I went to hell and you went to heaven, it would not be hell that was hell. It would be my absence from you. If I allowed myself that sort of indulgence of being with you. And we have all of these other points throughout this poem. I could not die with you because we would be apart. I could not watch you freeze because that would take us apart possibly, and I want that privilege of death if you are gone. I could not rise with you because your face would put out Jesus. Jesus's face would be gone if I lived with you. If I were seeing your face every day, I got no place for Jesus. These are all extreme examples of the want that our speaker has for this other body. So that's one interpretation. I couldn't take it. I could not take being with you. It would be too much for me. If you think about this in terms of other things, For me, if someone sat down a 10-pound bucket of beef jerky in front of me, I know it would be bad for me. I would die, right? I cannot live with beef jerky. I have to just know that about myself. If someone sat a 32-ounce energy drink in front of me, I could not live with it. I would have a heart attack. I would indulge in that thing, and it would be the end of me. That is one way to interpret this poem, very literally. That's a nuanced emotion, isn't it? To know about oneself. I don't think that this is something that people normally think about. I don't think that it's something that I do normally think about it every time I go to the grocery store. I have to avoid the beef jerky aisle because it would be terrible for me. But I don't think that's something a lot of people think about, this idea that there are people that would ruin you. And we see this all the time. Good people who go bad because they fall for the wrong person. When they do, they are so ridiculously in love with that person that it is bad for them. Now, the poem here does not state that this beloved other is necessarily a bad person, is necessarily a thief, a drug user, a drunk, an abuser, any of these things. But our speaker knows. Our speaker knows this about, we'll just use her for the sake of conversation here. Our speaker knows this about herself. Were she to be with this other beloved, the her would disappear, would be gone from frame. That enough is reason to write this poem. That enough is reason to have these thoughts. And what a brilliant way to explicate them. But there's another way to read this. There is another way to read this poem, which is quite possibly even more depressing. And look, when you read Emily Dickinson, when you have Emily Dickinson's poetry in front of you, it's just a race to the bottom, and the bottom is depression. There are always more and more depressing ways to take Emily Dickinson's poetry. But we have here these statements, I cannot live with you, because that would be life, and life is over there. In this very statement, we have the speaker proclaiming a less than status, right? I cannot live with you because that would be life. That would be better than where I am. In fact, that would be so much better than where I am. It might kill me. If I had that 32-ounce Red Bull, it might kill me. So, with this proclamation of less than status already on the table, we have a decision to make. How much less than are we willing to read in to our speaker's situation? Our speaker is proclaiming to be less than. What if this beloved other doesn't really want the speaker? What if this beloved other is saying to the speaker, hey, I can't really come out tonight. I got to wash my hair. Is it possible that this poem is written from the standpoint of someone who is being shunted, someone who is being cast out, someone who is being set aside? If this poem is, in fact, written from someone who doesn't just believe she cannot have this beloved other, but is being told, no. Is this poem a rationalization? Is this poem our speaker saying, look, I cannot live with you because that would be life, and life is over there. I cannot have you because you told me no. So now I have to go through this entire canon of what it is that I believe you to be and write these things for me, write this ship for myself, understand this less than status in a way that allows me to live my life from day to day without the shame, without the such hurt feelings as to prevent me from going on. What if this poem is written from the standpoint of someone who has been turned down and is now rationalizing why she cannot have the other? I think that's a very interesting reading of this poem. I think that both of these readings are very interesting for this poem. I think that there are probably 1,000 other readings that could be taken into this. Those are the only two that I have for today. If you like or appreciate this sort of thing, it really does help me out if you decide to hit that like button. It tells YouTube to share this video with other literature lovers, and if you find yourself here by chance but not design, consider hitting the subscribe button because literature is the only thing that I talk about on this channel, dropping multiple videos a week. There's poetry every Monday. We're currently going through a read-along of Ernest Hemingway's Fincavesia edition, short story by short story through Ernest Hemingway. Recently wrapped up Dubliners by James Joyce. So, recently wrapped up Holly by Stephen King. So there's a lot of stuff going on the channel at all times. Going through Sylvia Plath poem by poem. So again, there's so much stuff going on the channel. Check out the playlist page if you are not acquainted with that, because there's all sorts of things that I have done on the channel as well as that I am doing right now. And I hope to have you back for the next one.